Pope Francis's recent comments on Russia sparked a considerable amount of controversy. The Pope spoke to Russian Catholics, and some interpreted his words as affirming Russian imperialism, and also then felt that his words could then be used to support Putin's agenda and the war in Ukraine. But Pope Francis has come out twice now and clarified and has assured people that this is certainly not what he was intending to convey. Let's take a look at what Pope Francis said and what his explanation was. And by the way, I just want to remind you, make sure to hit that like button and especially the subscribe button. Help me grow this channel so I can reach more people with the content that you appreciate and enjoy from Reason and Theology. From Catholic News Agency. After the leader of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church expressed great pain and concern at Pope Francis's recent video message to young Russian Catholics, the Vatican said that the Pope did not intend to exalt Russian imperialism. Vatican spokesman Bruni said Tuesday that the Pope intended to encourage young people to preserve and promote what is positive in Russia's great cultural and spiritual heritage, and certainly not to glorify imperialistic logic and government personalities. The statement came in response to concern from the major archbishop of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church over Pope Francis's words referring to the great Russia of Peter I, Catherine II, that great and enlightened Russian empire of much culture and much humanity. Pope Francis made the comment while speaking off the cuff during a live video conference with Russian youth on August 25th. Before the final blessing, Pope Francis said, "Do not forget your heritage. You are heirs of a great Russia, the great Russia of saints, of kings, the great Russia of Peter II, Catherine II, that great and enlightened Russian empire of much culture and much humanity. Never deny this heritage. You are the heirs of the great Mother Russia. Carry on with it, and thank you for your way of being and for being Russian." The remarks were made in Italian after the Pope's question and answer session with youth before the blessing and were not included in the available live stream nor in the official transcript of Pope Francis's speech released on August 22nd by the Holy See Press Office. The Pope's words were published on the Moscow Archdiocese platform at the conclusion of the youth event on the 27th. Pope Francis referenced Russia's czars, who expanded the Russian Empire in centuries past, and whom President Vladimir Putin previously invoked in justifying the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The Ukrainian Major Archbishop responded with alarm. "We hope that these words of the Holy Father were spoken spontaneously, without any attempt at historical evaluations, let alone support of Russia's imperialist ambitions. There is a danger that these words could be taken as supporting the very nationalism and imperialism that has caused the war in Ukraine today, a war that brings death and destruction to our people every day," he added. The Apostolic Nunciature in Ukraine later released a statement firmly rejecting the interpretation that Pope Francis might have encouraged young Russian Catholics to draw inspiration from historical Russian figures known for imperialist and expansionist ideas and actions that negatively impacted neighboring populations, including the Ukrainian people. The Vatican Embassy added that the words of the Roman Pontiff are to be understood in the context of Pope Francis being a staunch opponent and critic of any form of imperialism or colonialism across all peoples and situations. The Archdiocese of Moscow told CNA that it stands with the clarification provided by the Holy See Press Office. At Pope Francis's video conference with the young Russian Catholics, the Pope urged them to be peacemakers and bridge builders. "I wish you, young Russians, the vocation to be artisans of peace in the midst of so many conflicts, in the midst of so many polarizations on all sides, which plague our world," he continued. Hey, just a quick reminder, if you're looking to buy or sell a home, office, or any kind of property anywhere in the world, and you want to support the pro-life movement in the process, check out realestateforlife.org. They will take a portion of their commission upon sale and donate it to a pro-life organization at no cost to you. realestateforlife.org. And tell them Reason and Theology sent you. A second clarification has also been made by Pope Francis on this issue. In his return flight from Mongolia, he was asked, Your Holiness, your recent remarks to young Russian Catholics about Great Mother Russia, the legacy of figures such as Peter the Great and Catherine, have spurred some discussion. The comments have greatly irritated, for example, Ukrainians. They have also had diplomatic consequences and have been seen to some extent as almost an exaltation of Russian imperialism and a sort of endorsement even of Putin's policies. I wanted to ask you, why did you feel the need to make these remarks? If you have reflected on the opportunity of making them, if you would repeat them. And also, just to make things clear, can you tell us what you think of imperialism, and in particular, Russian imperialism? Francis says, let's talk about the context. It was a dialogue with young Russians. And at the end of the dialogue, I gave them a message that I always repeat, to take responsibility for their legacy. First point, take on your legacy. I say the same thing everywhere. And with this in mind, I try to create a dialogue between grandparents and grandchildren, that the grandchildren take on their legacy. I say this everywhere, and that was the message. A second point to clarify what I mean with legacy. I mentioned the idea of Great Russia because the Russian legacy is very good. It was beautiful. Think about the field of literature, of music, going back to Dostoevsky, who today speaks to us of mature humanism. Russia took charge of this humanism, which developed in the arts and literature. This would be a second aspect when I spoke of legacy, wouldn't it? The third point perhaps wasn't appropriate, but speaking of Great Russia, not so much in a geographical sense, but in a cultural sense. I remembered what we were taught at school, Peter the First, Catherine the Second, and this third point came up, which maybe wasn't quite right. I don't know. Let the historians tell us. But it was an additional note that came to my mind because I had studied it at school. What I told young Russians is to take charge of their legacy, to take on their legacy, which means not to buy it elsewhere. Take on your legacy. And what legacy did Great Russia leave? Russian culture is of a great beauty and depth and should not be canceled for political reasons. There have been dark years in Russia, but its legacy has always remained intact. Then you spoke about imperialism, and I wasn't thinking of imperialism when I said that. I spoke of culture, and the transmission of culture is never imperial. Never. It's always dialogue. And I was talking about that. It's true there are imperialisms that want to impose their ideology. I'll stop here. When culture is distilled and turned into ideology, it's poison. Culture is used but distilled into ideology. We must distinguish the culture of a people from the ideologies that then appear from some philosopher, some politician of that people. And I say this for everyone, also for the church. Within the church, there are often ideologies which separate the church from the life that comes from the root and goes upward. They separate the church from the influence of the Holy Spirit. An ideology is incapable of incarnation. It's only an idea. But when ideology takes over and becomes politics, it usually becomes a dictatorship, right? It becomes an incapacity to dialogue, to move forward with cultures. And imperialisms do this. Imperialism always consolidates from a ideology. In the church, too, we must distinguish doctrine from ideology. True doctrine is never ideological, never. It is rooted in God's holy, faithful people. Instead, ideology is detached from reality, detached from people. I don't know if I answered your question. Well, there's a couple things that we could glean from this clarification. Number one, it would be helpful if Pope Francis stopped offering comments off the cuff, because these are often misunderstood, and then he has to follow up with clarification, and it would just be helpful to avoid that and simply drop the off-the-cuff comments. Number two, not engaging in rash judgment and giving a person the judgment of charity goes a long way. It's very clear Pope Francis is against Russian imperialism or any form of imperialism. So it's pretty easy to see that he was not intending to defend anything negative in these Russian historical figures. He was simply pointing to good aspects that can be found in Russian culture. Hey, thanks for watching. Be sure to hit the like button and especially the subscribe button so I can continue to grow this channel and reach more people with the content that you appreciate and enjoy. Also, check me out at patreon.com/Reason to Theology to get access to extra content and to support me. And also check out the GoFundMe link that is there in the show notes. That will help me continue to grow this channel and to keep the lights on, if you will. And at the very least, please support me with your